Hi, so I'm Tyger Drew-Honey. I'm a 20-year-old actor and presenter from Surrey. I love doing what I do, and I think it's about time really that we all ditch the label. There's a lot of issues that I've explored in my documentary series, sort of issues around the porn industry, sexism, body image, sexuality, and these are all things that I think have changed more than they've ever changed in the last few years, maybe even the last sort of 50 years. Especially with the technological revolution, all the new ways that people connect and stuff. We're not used to dealing with these kind of issues in that sort of arena as such, and so I think it's something that we do need to start a dialogue about, because the world is changing and we need to make sure that we don't keep our minds in old views as the world does change. I think Tyger Takes On was a series where often in the past there's been documentaries that have looked at issues affecting young people, a lot of the issues that Ditch the Label protest for, but they've always been from a kind of outsider's point of view, someone a bit older and someone who's not necessarily experiencing those things, just someone who kind of comes in and talks about them and gives a judgment. Whereas I think when I did Tyger Takes On, because when I started that I was actually 17 and I was really part of that generation experiencing the issues we were investigating, and I think that helped me connect with the audience a bit more, and because I was always honest, I think I really was able to kind of build a relationship with the audience, and actually they think, this guy's not just sort of judging us or whatever, he's one of us and he's going through this too. And so I think that connection really helped the series be quite popular. I'm not really the type of person who is easily shocked. I mean, I've had sex with a robot on TV. I think one of the main things that shocked me over my kind of documentary career as such has actually been, just the vast array of different people, actually coming to realise how many different people there are in the world, and how we're all equal in one way, but how we can all be so different in another. Spending time with drag queens and transgenders and people who use sexual technology every day, people who use steroids, just seeing all these different kinds of people and connecting with all of them on very different levels made me realise actually it's a very big world. And one of the most brilliant things about our world is actually the vast variety of people that we have in it. There's various things which have stood out to me when doing my documentaries that are really quite key issues to our generation. I think one of the most noteworthy, and the reason it's the most noteworthy is because I think often it's quite unintentional. There's a lot of sexism in the world, and that's still changing. But lad culture, the kind of sexism that comes from young, sort of almost stereotypically rugby boys. I made a documentary about that, and that's something that can be really offensive and really alienate someone on a night out and kind of ruin a woman's night. But the reason it's noteworthy to me is because none of these guys were actually really that sexist. They weren't, the kind of militant sexist that you do get from the years before. It's just the way that this culture has evolved, and this sort of idea of drinking and then saying, show us your tits, love. And these boys that I was hanging out with were really nice guys, and none of them knew what they were doing. None of them actually had an understanding of how offensive they could be with their behaviour, and how sometimes actually they're making women cross over to the other side of the street so that they feel safe. But they really didn't realise, and I think often with issues in today's world, people know what they're doing wrong, but they keep doing it because they believe it. Whether it's right or wrong, they believe it. But I think with a lot of the lad culture, a lot of young guys just do it, and they don't really know they're doing anything wrong. And it's only when you tell these guys and actually make them understand that actually a lot of them will change. And I think that's something we should focus on in the future, making people realise what tiny little comments can actually mean to someone. I have experienced bullying in the past. Bullying as a whole is can be very varied, and I think I was probably quite lucky in my sort of bullying story. It didn't last for too long, but when I joined my secondary school, I was picked on a lot because of what my parents did, and people just presumed I was incredibly arrogant because I was on TV and I was called Tyger. And so I did have a couple of physical things happen, and people would always reference my mum and my dad's job to me for a little while. And I was intimidated to go into morning registration for quite a while. It used to be something I didn't just do it, I really had to kind of brace myself to go into registration for about a year. But in the end, I did have to tell someone, and it did get sorted out. But since then, I kind of try and match those sort of things with adversity, and don't just take it. You have to kind of brush things off, and for me, that was how I managed to sort of overcome it. Once I'd spoken to someone, and once I realised that if I don't give them a provocation, then it's going to stop. And eventually it did stop, and it hasn't happened for years. But it was quite a tough time, and I'm glad that it did end in the way that it did. Advice to give to someone who might be experiencing bullying is a real tough one, because you want to say to someone, rise above it. A lot of the time they're bullying because they're jealous of you. A lot of the time these people have got a lot of issues themselves, and you kind of want to say you need to brush it off, because what these bullies want from you is a reaction, and if they don't get it, they'll get bored. One of the tricky things about that is, then maybe they might go and bully someone else. And it's really hard to say you just need to brush it off, because when you are in that position and you're feeling really down and you're getting this kind of onslaught of stuff happening, like every day or whatever, it can be really hard to think, I can just deal with this. And I think the main thing that I would say is talk to someone, because I tried for ages to just try and deal with it. And it was only really after I'd spoken to someone about it that dealing with it actually kind of worked, because at that point it was petering out. But for ages I just tried to deal with it, and it just carried on. And then when I did speak to someone, that was it. So I think, however hard it might be, however shameful you might feel, it's very courageous to speak to someone, but I think that's what you should do, because it's not right being bullied, and I think you need to tackle it at the source rather than just trying to deal with it. I have received negativity from the media before. There's been sort of big stories about my parents. When it first came out, it was like a big 3-page spread in the Times, like A Star Is Porn, and it was all like a big expose about my parents and stuff. And quite recently as well, I've had something happen in the press which was very invasive and really wasn't pleasant at all, and it really stressed me out. And to be honest, I'd have to say that the only way I dealt with it is because time just passed, and enough time had passed that actually everything kind of ended. But when it was going on, it was very stressful for me. I find it hard to give an answer on how I actually dealt with it, because I don't think I really did deal with it particularly. And I guess that just shows how hard it is to take those kind of things. And when you're stressed and when you're down, it's all very well someone saying, come on, pick yourself up, but people were saying that to me and I was still very down about it. So it's kind of a vicious circle, really. Feelings are very easy to hurt, I think. I've been cyberbullied before, actually. I'm not sure, when I was about 11, I think I was receiving death threats on a big social media site, and that happened for quite a while, and it did get very scary, actually. Even though it was completely senseless rubbish, it wasn't like, oh, we know where you live and stuff. It was just really vicious threats, and I got the police involved and stuff. And that was something that was really stressful for me. I think the thing about cyberbullying is, I know this is a cliche, but it's a far more cowardly form of bullying, because you're doing it from behind a screen. You're sort of avoiding the confrontation. You're not giving people sort of a right to reply, almost. And often that can sort of go into the sort of libelous and slander area, which is obviously really bad as well. But I also think the thing about cyberbullying is, because so much of young people's lives is online now, especially for some people who might go to school and get bullied. In the olden days, they might have thought they can come home and have some sort of respite. But nowadays, that's so much harder, because everything's online, and it's incredibly weird to have no online presence nowadays. But if you're being horrendously cyberbullied, then that, for me, would be the best option, because it's kind of like a constant thing, especially if it's anonymous. It can be really ominous and really quite scary. I think the digital age has kind of enabled people to explore their sexuality a bit more, with the way the world is changing with regards to technology. It's given people a lot more platforms to kind of advertise themselves, and like, this is me, look at my selfie and stuff. And I think it's fabulous, and the world is moving in the right way in that sense. But I do think it also makes some people feel like they constantly have to be looking their best, and you constantly have to be having a better time than everyone else. I think that's one of the most dangerous things about the digital age, because it's like, look at me, my life's brilliant, and people who look at those pictures, I think it can give a good sense of depression to some people. They think, why aren't I on that beach? Why don't I have a body like that? Why haven't I got a girlfriend who looks like that? And so I think in general it's really dangerous with social media, but at the same time, social media has enabled people, like the LGBT community, to connect on a scale that they would have never been able to. You've got gay bars or whatever, but now you can kind of connect with gays and trans people sort of all over the country. And I think for that community, which has been at the brunt of a lot of abuse and stuff over the years, to have that network, I think that's a really good thing, and I think that has been very positive for that community. My parents did work in the porn industry, and a lot of people think that I had like a very seedy upbringing. I really didn't. I had a fantastic upbringing. I went to like really good schools, and I lived in a fantastic house, and honestly, I've been so lucky with my upbringing, really. And one of my first memories actually is a Christmas party that we had at the house I was born into, and there's this guy Pascal who was like walking me along the ceiling because I was tiny. Obviously, I'm sure he wouldn't be able to do that now. And he bought me like this amazing present. I can't remember what it was, but just this really warm, amazing Christmas party, being walked on the ceiling, getting amazing presents. And I later come to learn that every single person at the party was a porn star, like my family's circle of friends at that time. And I just remember all these really warm things that happened. Nothing was ever seedy, no one was ever like not lovely. And I think people think that there's a very dirty side to the porn industry, but actually, although there kind of is, I had a fantastic upbringing. It wasn't like my parents sat me down one day and said, this is what we've done, this is where all this comes from. It was very euphemistically explained to me from the age of 3. Even at that Christmas party, I knew that Pascal was a man who had special cuddles with champagne while Daddy filmed it. And that was just kind of my understanding. As I got older, I understood, I gradually came to understand it, but by about the age of 11, I properly knew what was going on. I never held anything against my parents, they fantastic parents, and that's just how they earned their money. I think the important thing is to see the porn industry as a form of entertainment and not as a true representation of sex. That's the danger. I think, I remember I spoke to a girl in the past whose boyfriend had become addicted to rape porn, and he couldn't sexually get aroused unless they were he was pretending to rape her. And that was because he was insufficiently sexually educated, and he was sexually inactive when he started watching this porn, and that was how the sexual part of his brain was tuned, and because that's what he believed sex was genuinely by the time he'd watched it enough, that had quite disastrous consequences, and definitely psychological consequences for the girl in question. So I think you just need to really try and understand. Like, I watch porn, I quite happily wank over porn, probably daily, but I know that it's just not real, and that, I don't like sort of rough porn or anything anyway, but even if people do like that, which is completely legal and fine, you need to make sure that you understand there's a big difference in taking that into the bedroom with a real person. If I could go back in time and tell my younger self one thing, I know this is like a little bit off topic, but I tell myself not to smoke because it's something that I haven't managed to stop yet, and I do far too much. And when you're sort of young and you're trying things and you don't think much of it, that's one thing, but then you get, I know I'm only 20, but you get to a certain age and you think, I've only got one body, I've only got one life, most likely, and it's not something I should have started. I should have listened to my teachers and my parents, and I shouldn't have started smoking, but don't smoke. A lot of people say to me that I'm like really confident, and I think I do come across that way, but there's a lot of insecurity that I do have about myself, and I do get nervous about things, and I think one of the most important things is to understand that we're all human, and that everyone has insecurities, and everyone gets nervous, and these things don't necessarily mean anything. It's just part of being human, and all you really need to remember is that this is your journey, and it's you being born to you dying, however you might die. That is all that really matters. Whatever happens in that, you just need to try and take in your own personal way. Although because of the constructs of society and stuff, a lot of things we can't help but see in negative ways, but we need to try and process them into positives in every instance that we can. There's a lot of crap in life, there's a lot of good in life, and if we can somehow process the crap into not being that crap, and process the good as being good, then we'll come out above the law of averages.